Hi, my name is Sylvia. Welcome to our final group presentation, where Group 5, including Justin, Rayleni, and myself, will discuss one of the more recent Confederate statues that were removed in the Act of Progressive Change and the series of controversies beforehand that led to its eventual removal. This Confederate statue would be of the Chief Justice Taney, formerly located in the old Supreme Court chamber in the Capitol. Diving into Robert B. Taney's background, Roger B. Taney was born on March 17, 1777, into a distinguished family in Calvert County, Maryland, who owned a slave plantation. Over the years, Taney's perspective on slavery changed, and he freed many of the slaves he inherited, but by 1857, he had become an advocate for pro-slavery sentiments. Prior to being appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, Taney held important roles as the U.S. Attorney General and U.S. Secretary of the Treasury with President Andrew Jackson's support. In 1835, President Jackson chose Taney to take over for the former Chief Justice John Marshall, a role he would serve in for a lengthy period of 28 years. By the time of his passing on October 12, 1864, Justice Taney had presided over several landmark cases, the most notable being the majority opinion in the 1857 Dred Scott case, which determined that Congress lacked the authority to prohibit slavery in its territories. Taney was deeply troubled by the criticisms from the North regarding the institution of slavery and sought to leverage his Dred Scott decision to put an end to this discussion of slavery in the South. His ruling faced substantial criticism, with many asserting that it contributed to the Southern secession from the Union and the onset of the Civil War.
In Dred Scott versus Stanford, Dred Scott enslaved men sued for his freedom in the Missouri court. He argued that he had lived in free service with his own slaver, which made him free. Scott's case reached the Supreme Court, where Taney declared that African Americans, whether enslaved or free, were not citizens under the Constitution and therefore cannot sue in federal court. He also ruled that Congress did not have the authority to prohibit slavery in the territories, declared the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which prohibited slavery in certain territories as unconditional. The decision of Dred Scott versus Stanford expanded the reach of slavery. This all culminated in 1861 with the American Civil War. In February 1865, Senator Lyman Trumbull of Illinois introduced a bill to remember bust of Taney in the Supreme Court. This was met with strong opposition from Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. It wasn't until 1874 when Congress resolution was passed by a joint committed to a bust of Taney. The bust, created by sculptor Agnes Stan Gardens, were placed in the Supreme Court chamber in 1877.
The two-day Unite the Right rally of 2017 can be viewed as the modern trigger for the removal of Confederate statues and monuments. This rally, held in Charlottesville, Virginia, was organized to protest the planned removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The event, which attracted white supremacists and far-right groups, escalated into violent clashes and culminated into the tragic death of counter-protester Heather Heyer. The rally highlighted the divisive nature of Confederate symbols and intensified national debates about their place in public spaces. In the aftermath, many cities and states took renewed steps to reconsider the presence of Confederate monuments, viewing them as enduring symbols of racism and oppression, rather than historical heritage. In August 2017, following the events of the Unite the Right rally, 2 statues of Taney, along with other Confederate monuments, were removed from public spaces in Maryland and placed in a storage facility. This action was part of a broader effort to address the controversial legacy of Confederate symbols in public spaces. The Maryland Archives attempted to donate the statues to museums, however, none expressed interest in accepting them. While the reason for their rejection wasn't stated, one can infer that the museums were hesitant to house items that might attract controversy, provoke protest, or to be perceived as endorsing the divisive ideologies represented by these monuments. Monuments and statues of Confederate leaders and supporters continue to generate disagreements today. The Maryland Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans and many other people who have ties to Confederate ancestry continue to advocate for the statues to be returned to their original platforms, arguing that they represent historical heritage. However, others have proposed alternatives for the monuments. Some suggest that they should be destroyed or melted down, with the material repurposed to create monuments honoring civil rights leaders. 4 years later, in 2021, the House passed a resolution to remove Confederate statues from the U.S. Capitol and replace its bust of Taney with one honoring Thurgood Marshall, a Maryland native and the first African-American Supreme Court justice.
Thurgood Marshall was a respected civil rights activist and lawyer who sought to counter Jim Crow laws and dismantle segregation in the United States for the welfare of African Americans. The decision was met with much criticism, namely by Confederate leaders and supporters, while others were overjoyed in replacing Justice B. Taney's statue with that of Thurgood Marshall. These supporters believed that this change would promote positive ideals and send out a better image of what America is striving to embody today and for our future generations: equality, justice, and progress. With all that being said, I'd like to end this presentation on one final note. How many more statues of historical figures need to be torn down for progressive activists to get their message across? Ideally, what does removing these statues signify for future generations? And what unforeseen consequences will this have on the written history of the United States as we know it?